Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week with an album reaction where we go through an entire album track by track, exploring each one in isolation and it's part of the larger whole. Today we're going to be looking at Soen's second album, Tellurian, which was released in 2014. We have 9 tracks here, although one of them is only 30 seconds. That's our intro. Most of them are on the mid-size length, a lot of 5, 6, 7-minute tracks, but we have a couple 8s to wrap up the album. My guess is we're probably going to have somewhere between 5 and 8 analysis segments on here. 52 minutes ahead of us. Let's dive in. We're going to check out the first 2 tracks here, Komenco and Tabula Rasa. Let's kick it. We have polyrhythms pushing past bar lines. Very compressed. Beyond that, there's not a lot of hard articulation on the notes. Every note just kind of blurs into the next when they're fully distorted like that. Yeah, very fun drum work with the toms and the cymbal. Bass absolutely laying down the low end here. Nice vocal stack. I like the production on the vocal stack too. The center is very narrow, and then everything on the outside just builds a wall around that. Guitars are just chords, the basses are pushing melody alongside the vocals. The drums are melodic too. Lots of groove in the guitar work as well. There's a smoothness to all of this. If all the options are theirs, we can be the system. It will
gonna try to own us. We can have everything if we would change into them. Now it's our time to choose which of the options are theirs.
Okay. Also shifting from a 3 to a 4. Or sorry, from a 4 to a 3.
Slow it down, we're treading
Okay, yeah.
on the soil that gave us life. Slow
The reverb on the snare.
we're coming round, I'm
Yeah, I like that.
feeling for our life.
Yeah. I think I'm going to enjoy this. I think I'm going to enjoy this album. Now, I don't know that this is going to be a great album for analysis, at least not on the emotional side of things. I think the ending stands out a bit to me, but most of what I heard in the first 2/3, it's just metal to me. Not quite as aggressive as metal can be, but I don't really get a lot of emotionality out of it. But I am going to have a lot to talk about on the technical side of things, which is going to be pretty fun. And just to kick that off, let's look at the drum work on this. Absolutely love the melodic drumming in here. The drummer does a fantastic job of keeping the core beat. Somewhere in the kit, sometimes it is the main melody, that tom run that we have through parts of the verse. I mean, that's just a lot of eighth notes. That is certainly keeping the core pulse, especially with the accent points that it gives us right there at the end. Having that snare accent on every other 3 is giving us the core pulse of that final section. The drummer always finds a way to introduce this to have that metronomic component to their playing. But it's always just a component. There's other parts to it. There is a melodic direction for the writing. It's not completely devoid of rhythmic cadence, but the rhythm itself, being the human metronome, is not the purpose of these drum parts. They are expressive, they are exploratory, they contribute to the feeling of the song. The drummer is always jumping around between all sorts of different ideas, some a bit more minimal, some a bit more maximalist, and always trying to incorporate as much of the kit as possible into the playing in ways that aren't strictly pattern based. For instance, if I just went snare, high tom, mid tom, low tom, snare, high tom, mid tom, low tom, that is using most of the kit, cymbals aside. We're using a lot of the kit there, but it's also very pattern based. A short pattern that gives us an accent point and then a small movement before resetting. There's a lot of rhythmic information here, even though it is a bit more exploratory than, I don't know, something more standard like bass kick on 2 and snare on 4 or something like that. It still kind of sits within that same area of being purely functional on a metric level. That's not what we get here. There's an entire use of the kit in fun, inventive ways, and in things that, at least as far as I would describe it, are they're showcasing the drummer's personality. And I think this is something that I really love about more melodic drumming, is that you kind of get to peer into the drummer as a composer rather than a time robot. That's not to say that more functional metronome based playing can't be fun, can't be interesting, but to me it's just usually a little less interesting because I really enjoy stuff like this. It connects with me better. It feels more unique. It feels like it has more character to it. But it also tells us something about the music. And this isn't completely inherent to melodic drumming. You can have, actually look at something like black metal, alternating, snare and bass at rapid paces. It tells something about the music. It gives an intensity and an energy and a forward momentum that's very different from a pretty standard rock beat or different from a standard R&B beat or something like that. They all have characteristic to them. But this doesn't feel tied to a genre. This feels tied to a performer. The drummer here is exploring this music. I'm getting to hear their voice rather than a style that fits the music. And again, it's not like this doesn't fit the music. It does. It's composed in a way that absolutely embellishes everything that's going on in the track, but it feels unique to them. This doesn't feel like a drum part I would hear from another drummer. And I think that's the big difference between what I typically enjoy in melodic drumming versus more functional drumming. And it is on full display here. The tom runs, the use of the cymbals, where the accent points go inside of the ideas, inside the patterns themselves, the full use of the kit, the ever-changing component. Even within the verse itself, we have like 2 or 3 different patterns that kind of get cycled around between. It never really is, this is the verse pattern, this is the chorus pattern, and just kind of locking into these. There's larger ideas that comprise each of these sections. The drummer is just absolutely killing it while providing the energy of a section. When we kind of bring the energy down a little bit in the verse, the drummer comes down as well too. There's not as much snare in here. There's not as much cymbal, which would be bright and explosive. If there is cymbal, it's closed hi-hat. It's a little bit of ride work. It's the quieter parts of it. And finding ways, okay, if I'm restricted to these instruments because they fit the atmosphere best, how can I do something of interest with that? That also, embodies the feeling that we're going for here. And there's just a lot of thought that goes into it that I enjoy and I appreciate. And I'm certainly here for, I can't wait to be enthralled by the drummer on the next 7 tracks, because this, if there are anything like this, that has kind of my experience with it. Not to say that everything else was not interesting, just the drummer consistently stole the show for me. There is one other instrument though that I continued to come back to, and that's the bass. And this is another cool thing about this track. It's bass led through almost every single section. The bass isn't the most prominent. It isn't the loudest instrument in any section of this track, other than a little bit of the bridge. But it is the melody keeper. It plays counterpoint to the vocals in a way that nobody else does. We do have guitars in here, and the guitars are more prominent in the mix. But what are they doing most of the time? Texture, rhythm, chords. They're secondary components. They are foundational. They create the atmosphere for everything else to reside within. I like the sound of the guitars. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit because it gives a lot of the flavor of this song that I was talking about during the reaction. But what's actually on paper for the guitars isn't really interesting. There's a couple of cool riffs that kind of bounce between 3 to 4 notes in order to create momentum and drive. Again, it's a very textured style of writing. So it's not like they're always just playing chords, but their melodic ideas just aren't the strongest compared to the bass melodies and the vocal melodies, which is fine because it's a tertiary melody here. They're not designed to be competing or contrasting with everything else. They're designed to create momentum and atmosphere without being boring, because you can certainly just strum chords. That's not interesting, but it will give you atmosphere and emotion. They find a way to move one step beyond that, but they are kind of tertiary in the lineup of melody. They're just not as important as the rest, and that's very cool. Rock and metal is exceptionally electric guitar oriented, and honestly, I'm a big fan when we don't see that, when we invert the pyramid a bit and give the rhythm section the focus. And that's what we get here, really strong drumming and slick bass melodies. And when you key into the bass at almost any part in this track, it is absolutely leading the song, playing counterpoint to the vocals, having cool riffs. There's momentum to it. We do get harmonic information through the concept of chord shaping. But I just love that it's the guitar, the bass, not the guitars, that's laying down the melody here. And the bass sounds great too. It has its strength and width, but it's not muddy. It's not overly done, but it's not too small either, which is, to me, it's a balancing act. Basses sound great when they're big, but melodies sound great when they're narrow. It's the reason why you pick pretty much any metal band and they're going to have their verse and riff sound, and then they'll have a separate sound for their solos, and it tends to be a bit narrower, a bit smaller, and that just allows the melody to ring out. It allows for better enunciation to it. So the bass always has to balance that, and I think in this case they did a fantastic job, and I can't wait to listen to more of how the bass and the drums and the vocals interact throughout this album. Now, the guitars, they create something very interesting in this track, and I had picked up on it at the very beginning. The sound is a little more compressed than I would have liked, but something that really stood out to me is a lack of attack, and this actually made the compression more pronounced. I don't think it was, as I got acclimated to the production of it, the compression really wasn't as bad as I initially thought it was, but a lot of it comes down to the fuzziness of the guitars. There is so much what I'm going to call production on them, which is the amps, the cabs, the effects pedals, everything that goes into it on top of the post-production, like any sort of effects they put on it in the audio workstation, or EQing that goes on, mixing, everything that goes into that process. But just right from the start, there's not really much of an attack. Notes just appear. They just are. And from that point, you kind of see how notes blur together. There's not a lot of attack on any of them. It's just kind of slurring into each other. Without a lot of attack, it just is. It creates this atmosphere of smoothness. You don't have da, 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 da. That's very sharp. It's very abrasive. This is softer. Notes just fluidly, smoothly move into one another. And the smoothness is fairly consistent throughout the entire track. The bass has a nice smoothness to it. The guitar has a nice smoothness to it. The vocals are incredibly smooth, go down very nicely. Everything about this feels soft. Despite the heavy distortion, the clipping on the guitars, the overdrive, all of this that implies something large and loud and abrasive, it is a very smooth, soft sound in general. And it creates a soothing type of metal that I really like. It's quite different from your typical death metal out there, something like a Cryptopsy that's just very abrasive in all aspects. This is almost the complete opposite of that, while still retaining an incredibly metallic concept. I think that this works really well with the rising and falling action in this track, especially the slow part at the end. I was going to call it halftime feel, but maybe that isn't accurate. it feels like floating down a river, and so much of this song has already set up this idea of smoothness, of fluidity. So I really love how all of this comes together by the end of the track, and it just sets up an atmosphere and a mood that honestly I'm here for. It's technical where it needs to be, but not overly technical. It still has emotionality to it. And it's not aggressively metallic, though it is clearly metal music. On top of that, we have some really interesting rhythmic devices in here that are never too jagged to be obtrusive. Rhythmically, you can always groove with it. A lot of this is in 4/4, though not all of it. But it is still technical enough to kind of throw me for a loop. There is a section in the post chorus, maybe I don't remember where it is actually. It is one section though. I have no idea what the time signature is in it. I was counting 6s and 7s. It's possible that it's in 13. It's possible it's alternating 6 and 7, but it might be in something else too, because the accent points are consistently shifting. Where I feel 1 is just, it's not a consistent pattern. And we only hit that section twice, I think, so I didn't get a chance to really lock into it. I was listening to everything else that was happening too. But it's another way that I think they create smoothness through complexity. Smoothness through abrasion. I really enjoyed this track. Again, it's from a purely technical standpoint. I don't think there's anything in here that emotionally moved me or pushed me in any direction. But almost around every corner, all I could think of was, oh, dude, that's cool. You know, from a compositional standpoint, that was excellent. From a musician standpoint, you know, if I were to play that drum part, dude, that'd take me a long time to figure out. Not because it's complex in the idea itself, but just trying to figure out the logistics of how to do it. It's visually interesting. And it's just, you know, the bass licks, thick, dude. Vocal stacks, amazing. Oh, there's another area for smoothness, is the very clear and projected vocals in the center, but when they are harmonized, the other vocals are lower end, they're very wide, and they have a lot of reverb on them. So they don't feel like they're in any one specific place, they just kind of support the entire vocal bit. And also there's the harmonization in them too, as we have the more mid-range stuff in the main vocalist and then the lower range stuff supporting it. And it just creates this smoothness underneath the more directed, not necessarily staccato, but certainly less legato style of singing that we have in the center. And the vocals never really hit anything that's like piercing or belting. We don't ever like shoot up into the stratosphere with energy, intensity, pitch, or volume. It's another aspect that makes this very smooth. Keeps it sort of, I guess, in the range of... This feels weird to say, but easy listening. This is a very digestible track despite being progressive metal in a lot of ways. Let's hit some lyrics on this one, see what's going on there. Tabula rasa means a clean slate or a blank slate. It's a return to nothing, neutrality, emptiness, to start over again. Which is exactly what this track speaks about. But it is an external return to the roots. It's about somebody who sees a system that they don't agree with at all. And they just want to burn it all down, start from scratch, and be one of the people who helps build this system back up. Now, the system seems to be that they're talking about a system of control. It could be of governance. The chorus says, I will fight the system, break it down, and redesign it. I don't want anything the way it's created by them. Where is my right to choose if all of the options are theirs? I really like that final line. To be born into a world, a system, a society, an understanding of things that you just can't get behind anything that's going on. Verse 1 says that they were a person who lived in doubt and would not accept anything that they saw in front of them. It says that they've always been one to sort of think outside the box and not agree with any of the options they've been presented. What I find interesting though is the outro. It says, slow it down. We're treading on the soil that gave us life. Slowing down, we're coming round and I'm fearing for our lives. Ways we leave all that matter, all that we have, place be your trust with me. It's really interesting syntax throughout all of this, but I think the general idea here is an understanding that this is a planet for everyone. This soil gave us life. Earth itself presents us with a place to live. We need to remember that and keep that at our heart. And he, as a leader, will. That's why he says, place your trust in me. Interesting track. I didn't get any of that from the music. But the music to me was definitely, I mean, it's progressive metal. The smoothness, though, I think works. It reminds me of a smooth talker, a really charismatic person. This entire song just goes down easy. It's really digestible. And I think part of that goes with the ideas of being a charismatic leader. All right, let's dive into the next track here called Kuraman. A lot of bouncing around, very large pitch shifts.
Listen to the eye of intuition.
Very Tool right here. Very atmospheric. Everything's rather muted too. Tom's guitars are pushed to the side and shrunk. Vocals are quiet and whispered, very airy. The way the drum and the bass just taking turns, laying down some sick grooves, but keeping the energy low. Harmonies. I love the space in this section. Ooh, a little bit of instability there. I think the last section was 6, 6, 6, 5, alternating 12 and 11. This is back to a 4, 4 though. If this is the same 4, 4, they are chopping it up. Dude, that bass is so gnarly.
I will lie to you the way you did to have your say. In good company, turn the game around and make it work my way. Second you to me.
The drums taking on a more functional role here with that, the guitar movement really taking the lead underneath the vocals. dude, they push against the backbeat real hard. It's 4/4. That polyrhythm between the cymbal and then the snare. So we have this 4 beat here, but the cymbal in the last section, we're getting 14 within that 4. That's wild. I thought we were going to get back into that groove, a heavy ending. Love that little bit of tension in there into the uplift. From you giving in. Now, I heard a little bit of drone, maybe a very light, persistent tone at the end there. I also noticed that Tabula Rasa kind of went into track 3 as well. So I'm curious if it's not smooth transitions, but there are transitory ideas that pull us between tracks. I wonder if this is supposed to be listened to all as one. And most albums, of course, they expect you to listen to it all in one sitting, but at least this one, it feels like there's an attempt to tie them all together. Even if it's a very loose connection, it's still there. At least that's what I felt on these first 3 transitions here. And of course, track 1 into track 2, that was just very clear and deliberate. Track 1 shouldn't even be there, honestly. I still don't understand why bands do this. It's a 30-second track, and yes, it is distinct from track 2. It is mostly acoustic, it's all hand drumming, but it is a proper intro to track 2, both an intro to the album and the first proper track, and it's only 30 seconds. Just toss it at the beginning of Tabula Rasa. I don't know. One of these days, I need to find an answer to this. Maybe that'll be... Maybe I'll start an interview series where instead of hour and a half interviews where we talk through a lot, I just find a bunch of bands who do this and I'm like, why did you put a 30-second intro on here? Why was there a 40-second interlude? Why wasn't this part of another track? And I get a bunch of answers and I'll just supercut them into one video. That'll be the only question I ever ask anyone because I'm so perplexed by it. I've brought this up so many times with intros, interludes, and outros that are sub 1 minute. Why even do it? I still don't know. It's been 6 years of posing this question to the public and many years prior to that, just kind of thinking it on my own. Anyways, Kuraman. A good follow-up to Tabula Rasa. Taking a lot of the ideas we saw there and going for something a bit lower energy, generally speaking. I think that this had some gnarlier, sharper rhythmic devices in it. Once again, though, we see a lot of wild rhythmic ideas within predominantly 4/4 music. It is wild how far they can push this while still retaining that digestibility. I don't know how much further they can push this. Eventually, it's got to break and it's got to move into the realm of more experimental rhythms that an average person isn't going to be able to groove to. But they seem to keep pushing the envelope. And I don't know. They don't have a lot further to go on this one. Something's going to break soon. But the drums are not as melodic as last time. There were quite a few sections in here which were just purely functional. The verse in here, just pretty straightforward 4/4 groove, keeping a nice metronomic backbeat to it all. We did get some cool polyrhythmic devices, but nothing really melodic. We had some cool tom runs at the beginning, but that was just relegated to that, almost feeling like a leftover residual from track 2 before he dipped into the rhythmic devices that would dominate track 3. The bass was a bit more muted here, less pronounced in the composition. Usually they are following along with the guitars or just kind of doing their own thing, not necessarily pedal tone related, but just less melodically dynamic than we saw on track 2. And this will be pretty cool going through the album, getting a little taste of a lot of varieties of composition styles. Track 2 was obviously more focused on rhythm section. This one was more focused on guitar riffs, honestly. I was going to pair that with the vocals, and I do think that is kind of accurate. There's a lot of really cool vocal work in here, but it's not really too distinct from track 2. Once again, we have smooth vocals, about middle range of pitch and intensity, sometimes supported by larger harmonic vocal stacks. Again, though, nothing really belting or powerful in here. They usually play a bit closer to the chest and allow the rest of the instruments to elevate the track. So in a lot of ways, this feels like the other side of a coin. If Tabula Rasa was the first side, it's presenting something very similar in construction, but sort of the opposite in a lot of ways as far as who's getting the focus on this one. I do feel that overall this one was more groovy, which I think isn't necessarily in contention with melodic drumming and bass, but it definitely focuses more on rhythmic device than melodic devices. And I think that shows throughout some of the more complex rhythmic sections. The one part at the beginning of the track I mentioned I didn't really have a good read on. What I got was mostly groupings of 3, but not super consistent. I eventually came to the hypothesis it might be 6, 6, 6, 7, putting a small extension at the end of the 4th bar. But I'm not entirely sure about that because we came back to something that felt like that section, but was clearly in 4/4 despite the aggressive pushing against 4/4's traditional backbone beats. The triple B, if you will. Oh, I will never say that again, I promise. Anyways, I was like, oh, wait, maybe the last section was in 4/4 also, but I don't know. It's tough when the accented beat starts bouncing around to different parts of the bar, especially as frequently as they like to mix things up. And when you kind of lose where 1 is, it becomes tough to figure out where anything is. 1 is the foundation. It is the key landmark. Every other landmark is based around 1. And in that first section, and in one of the sections in Tabula Rasa, I just lost where 1 was. And they do this frequently, and I think that it is part of the allure, part of their charm, is disguising 1 while still keeping a general groove. It's like, I don't know where 1 is, but this is definitely the pulse, so you can groove with it even if you have no idea where you are. And that's the complexity pairing with palatability. It makes it so it's listenable, but also disorienting if you're trying to figure things out. If you're just there for the ambiance, for the groove of it, you just, you put your headphones on, you close your eyes, and you just absorb it. Yeah, I don't know if the same sort of rhythmic schism is going to appear in your experience as it does with mine, but I absolutely feel this mix of understanding and feeling lost simultaneously that I get in their music frequently. They do a great job of this, and it's a very fine tightrope to walk, and they make it look so dang easy, dude. Now, Tabula Rasa also had high contrast with its intensity and volume. We see a lot of that in here, but I think it's more extreme this time around. The song is only 1 second longer, but I feel like we had more of a roller coaster, more frequent shifts between highs and lows. This one felt less like a journey and more like opposing sides representing their opinions, their thoughts, their whatever in rapid fire succession. You get 30 seconds, you're the quiet stuff. You get 30 seconds, you're the exciting stuff, and just bouncing back and forth between them. Not a lot of movement, not a lot of transition. It's just we were doing this, now we're doing this, now we're back to this, now we're back to that. And a lot of the sections ended up feeling very similar to me. This could be part of the verse chorus. For instance, if the verse is quieter and the chorus is louder, snapping back and forth between them is going to be moving from one to the other. Verses tend to share ideas. Choruses tend to be the same idea, musically at least, well, even lyrically. And this might be why it feels like it's a bit more compartmentalized than I would expect from something that jumps around like this, but it does. It feels like we're bouncing between two extremes more so than exploring a song that happens to be moving through extremes. Does that make sense? I hope so. And this kind of feeling of back and forth, of an argument or debate of sorts, is how I've come to understand this track. The harmonic palette, my emotional connection, the feeling of intensity versus calm, the opposing sides of this aren't just a loud versus quiet contrast, it's contrasting in pretty much every single way. Oftentimes even carving out space for the vocals to gain extra import in the smaller sections. So they're written differently, they have different emotional goals in mind, different layering, different roles for the instruments, and of course, different levels of intensity, layering, and volume. And this is why I think it feels like two opposing ideas clashing, or opposing whatevers clashing. It is a battle of duality. And they exist on so many opposing parallels. So it feels a bit, I don't know if disjointed is the right word. I mean, that describes it pretty well, but it also feels jostling. I felt tossed around in this track. And every time I felt like I could begin to anticipate where we were going. I got pretty good about anticipating when we would change, but I never quite got a hold of where we were going. And I thought this was pretty interesting. They kept me on my toes even when I was starting to pick up what they were laying down. Lyrics. Admittedly, I'm a little out of my depth here. There is an opposition, though. The chorus says, I can't make you stand your ground, so do it for the truth that you found. Verse 2, though, says, I will lie to you the way that you did, to have your say in good company. I'll turn the game around and make it work my way. So there is a power struggle, at the very least, here. But the chorus also says, when you trust, your words are one. You never gave your troubled mind a voice of instinct. Talking about the failings of this other person and the lack of trust they had within themselves, the lack of trust that they put in others. The first verse, though, I don't get at all. Once again, we have some really interesting syntax in here that kind of obfuscates some of the information a little bit. But I'm also not sure about the metaphors either. It says, listen to the eye of intuition, pattern it in play, stop the drift from drowning your heart in it just to waste away. You don't even need them, you're your own, you say, bridges light your way, I could only screen you from your window, no more than delay. I don't get it. That is pretty much all of this track, though. There is an idea that this other person wants things to end. Maybe they are willing to make compromises where our narrator isn't. That this other person would give in to demands if it meant an end to the conflict. But our narrator is not keen to that ending. And that creates, I think, a lot of the strife between our two people. All right, next up we have the track, The Words. Let's dive in. that bass came in so large. It is also slightly more muddy than I would like the bass to be. I don't think it's because it's too different from track 2. It's just overshadowed by the guitars, so we're really just getting the low end frequencies on it. It could be tightened up just a little bit. Very interesting, a momentary tension directly into relief. Nicely paced 3 here. Oh, I love the vocal run. Very gentle and caressing, both with the constant movement in the guitars, but also just the softness of his voice. Da, 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 da. I like that melody there, the rhythm to it.
No one to say.
Yeah. There's a little bit of tension from the intro again. I do like this fleshed out version of it, though. We do have this concept of growth throughout the track, always adding more layers. Like, I think we've still had a verse-chorus structure, but it's all about linear expansion. Maybe not linear, we have backed it down here. love this section.
Passing the hours as if they were days.
So powerful, filled with concern, a need to protect or help.
Until it's over.
There's a lament to it though. Maybe they can't.
The final escape.
Oh. I just looked at the time and saw that there's not a lot left. This is the end. I think it is because that section has so much energy from the vocals and violin on top of a more constrained guitar part that feels like it wants to explode into something larger. And it does the first time we go to that section. And between the direction it points and the fact that I heard the explosion previously, I was expecting it here. It really is, as overused as this phrase or word is within the reaction community, it was wildly unexpected. I was not expecting that. And that's always fun. I'm very good at picking up patterns in music, of seeing tropes and hearing how they're used. And even within this album, there's been some cool, unique ideas to it, but it is still very much within the more textured, rhythmic realm of progressive metal making. I don't really get surprised too often anymore, unless we're listening to something that's just hell-bent on breaking the rules, something experimental or avant-garde. After 6 years of exploring progressive metals, you begin to pick up keys, directions, tells of what things are doing. To genuinely be caught off guard is something I don't experience too much within the genres I listen to a lot, which progressive metal's definitely my most listened to album for this channel, but even outside of this channel in my own listening. And they genuinely surprised me here. It was a shock to notice that the time's up. There's nowhere for this to go. They have to wrap it. They have to wrap it up. I think even if I hadn't have opened my eyes and looked at the time there, the fact that the song would have ended would have been just as shocking to me. A bit more one note this time around than the previous two tracks. I think this is a decent place to put this. It's almost to the middle of the album. In fact, the next track would be the middle of the album. Should we hit a ballad on track 3? I don't know. I think it's fine. It works. We've had some higher intensity stuff on the last two tracks. I say track 3, it's technically track 4, but the first one's 30 seconds. I don't want to count that one. It's not a real track in my eyes. We're on proper song 3. That's really quick when you only have 8 tracks to go. I would normally put that towards the middle. One more track, maybe 2 more tracks in before you hit that. It tells me that this album's probably going to be a bit more diverse than I expected. I really thought we were going to get more of what we have been listening to. Track 3 was very Toolish. Track 2 reminds me of a band, and I cannot think of it for the life of me. But it's just very textured, atmospheric, progressive metal that focuses on interesting but digestible grooves. And here we kind of get that, but without the metal leaning. There's still some interesting timing things going on in here. The rhythms are a little unexpected, but still digestible. But it doesn't lean anywhere near as much onto those. This one really focuses on atmosphere. And instead of the driving groove that we have in the other tracks, this one is about wallowing in something. It's about just, sitting here and being in this moment. So much of this track is devoid of drums. So much of this track is just the atmosphere. There's no drive, no momentum towards anywhere. We are just absorbing this sound, this feeling, this emotion. The guitars have a little bit of momentum to them at times. There are some places in here where it's just constant eighth notes with varying accent points in order to create some interesting grooves. But a lot of it too is just arpeggiation and chords. Two functional ideas within harmonic writing. We do have a nice violin that shows up at times to support and play counter to the vocals. And the bass it's a bass. It gets overshadowed by the guitars a lot. I talked about this at the beginning. We get a lot of spotlight for the low end frequencies, but not the mid or higher end frequencies. It makes it sound a little muddier than I would have liked and nowhere near as clear as track 2. But it works. It fills out the low end, and honestly, that's its job. Much like the guitars, we're not here to steal the spotlight from the vocals. This is an emotional bearing of the soul in this one, by evidence that the vocals just start soaring and skyrocketing. Incredibly emotive writing on top of, I should say emotive performance from the vocals on top of pretty standard chord progressions that help imply very clearly the emotions at play here. This is a vocal driven song. That's where your attention is supposed to be. That's why there's no sick drum parts. That's why there's no wild guitar licks in this one. You're really supposed to be focusing on the story being told. The instruments are secondary to that. Through that lens, we do have the vocals, and I love this dude. Starting out in the same place he always does, something a bit airier, closer to the chest, more comfortable in volume, in range. Sit here for a while and then just start building. And I'm like, oh, dude, it's rising in pitches. Where's he going with this? And he just shoots off into the stratosphere and he's way up there. The violin comes in immediately to support this, to kind of bridge the gap a little bit between the instruments on the floor and the vocals way up there, trying to find something to help bridge that gap while also presenting some nice counterpoint. It isn't just the vocals up there alone. It isn't a very strong counterpoint. Most of it is based around quarter notes and half notes. It's a bit of a slower melody, especially compared to the vocals, but it is there. I really like that. The guitars underneath are focusing on, I had mentioned some sort of strength and lament that kind of came together as a failure to protect is kind of what I get out of that. I want to do good, but not being able to, and having guilt or grief over past failings. It's what a lot of I'm going to say it's the chorus. It's the big moment of the song. What we ended the track on. That's what it reminds me of. I think they do a fantastic job of doing that and putting it all within this incredibly beautiful overall sound. It is just a heartbreaking track, and I really love the little bits of tension that come in the verse, pre-chorus. It's definitely before the big moment. Little bits of tension that are brought into on like beat 4, and then we release them immediately on beat 1 of the next bar. It's a nice bit of foreshadowing that all is not as beautiful as it seems from the start, and that there is some sort of tension or dissonance, darkness, something sorrowful sitting underneath the surface, and it tries to bubble through and then it gets suppressed. Eventually, though, it breaks through in climactic fashion, and it is incredibly engaging to listen to the chords move in this direction. The vocals soar so high above them, and the violins key in to help out. There's definitely a little bit of pain in here. Not so much, I think, in the vocal delivery, but the vocal notes absolutely lean into this and put a spotlight on these parts of the chord progression. That's a powerful track right there. A bit more focused, I would say, despite being the longest on the album so far. There's quite a few that are longer than it as we get through this album. But it is the longest one we've heard so far. I also think it's the most focused one, the most single-minded one. A lot of the tracks so far, all two of them that we've listened to, have been about jumping between extremes. And this one is about a razor focus. It does have highs and lows, but they're all focusing around this one feeling, this one idea, and exploring all of it. It's also the one without drums, so it's like a whole section I didn't get to talk about here. Let's hit some lyrics. Once again, we have a track about two people. Interestingly, while there is some conflict between them towards the end of the track, it doesn't start off that way. In fact, the first pre-chorus says, "Patient, you stayed by my side for years. I know I owe you more than I have." But by the time we get to the end of the song, it says, "Struck by your silence and drenched in my doubt, numb from the burning cold, tear out the pages and change what I said. Mend my wrong." I think that's interesting. Maybe there was something in the past that our narrator regrets. The chorus says, "How we share this hopeless devotion, passing the hours as if they were days, and I won't breathe until it's over, no turning back, no final escape." So we have this idea of two people having similar goals in life, but both of them knowing that they can't accomplish their goals in their lifetime. It says that the hours pass as if they were days, but that our narrator has this dedication that they will do this until the end, that there's no turning back. Now, what all of this is, I'm not sure. The narrator seems to be in a position of weakness. Says they shiver through the through the fever, that there's a silence of the trees, that they lay here resting from trouble. Later on, it says that they'll bide here for the closing, fearless by the sea, time to let go of what's always been there. There's this element of sitting still, of letting things happen, of time passing. But also the shivering through the fever implies there's a sickness of some sort as well, and based on the pre-chorus, the other person has sat by their side for years, taking care of them. But there is this stanza too. It says, "Given the words that will make you leave, there's nothing left here and no one to save." I feel like I'm right on the tip of understanding this, but I haven't quite cleared. I haven't reached the full summit. One small step might actually get me to understanding, but I don't. I see the pieces, but they're not forming a larger picture for me. As usual in cases like this, I extend some help out. If you have an interpretation of this, let me know. I'm really curious what specifically is going on between these two. I say these two because I think my gut leans towards two people, but it could be more than that as well. Could be a personification of ideology, for instance, something more metaphorical that on the surface looks like two people but could represent more. The next track is called Pluton. Let's dive in. So the last track is one of our lightest. This, I think, is definitely one of the heavier so far.
Ways that I reflected, you've been there before, you always will. Still my tells me you have gone so far. They can't say where you are.
Oh, yeah. What a way to come into this section.
Compromising this. In despair, I'm hoping you can sense what is drifting in your ocean. Past beyond redemption. Left just to remember when the moment passed here. Silence thundered.
I love the varying placement of the supporting vocals.
Hear the hearts that ache to hear you say that it is not too late. Given no chance to forgive me, left to absorb an illusion.
So there's a chord of 4 here,
Beneath the sun,
but the symbols on the left give us this 3. There's a slow 4 that you can feel here if you want to.
you left like a last intervention.
Lots of layers rhythmically.
Now I swim against the tide and in the lake. I'm coming to your side, leave my life. Now putting out the lights that shine on mine. Oh, abandon me by time. Let open wide. Compromising this. In despair, I'm hoping you can sense what is drifting in your ocean.
sections like that I think have really nice movement between them, but more often than not we'll see what we saw last time, which is just high energy stripped immediately down to low energy. The bass just absolutely, you can feel when it's missing.
Putting out the lights that shine on my own, abandoned by time.
Oh, ho, ho, ho. I can't believe it's been 7 minutes already. This is what happened on the last track too. That's another one that I felt like we veered into the ending more naturally than we did on the words, which was probably intentional on that track. But despite bringing the energy down and concluding the harmonic passage in a desirable way, I suppose would be a way to phrase that, it still ends abruptly. I think it has to do with that bass line. Something about it still feels a little awkward. I don't think this has been consistent, but there also hasn't been any ending here that has just really worked for me strongly enough that I just point to it and like, that's an ending. That's how you wrap an idea up. Everything has been serviceable at best and noticeably awkward at worst. This is kind of tying into what I was talking about earlier as well with the transitions. A lot of the time we are looking at harsh transitions, and I don't want to point fingers. I don't know about Soen's other works. We've only heard a few tracks from them today. I think I've only heard a couple other in isolation. I don't want to say that they're just bad at doing endings, but certainly getting through this album, there really hasn't been a proper ending to anything. Usually something just stops. We were doing this riff, we didn't wrap it up, we just didn't repeat it. The drum pattern, the riff itself, it just abruptly ends and then we start something else. Endings just aren't what this album's focused on. And I think when we look at how harsh the transitions tend to be here, the smooth transitions also aren't moving from one idea to another, they're evolving a current idea, starting small and adding a layer and adding a layer and building from there. It's about growth, it's about continuation, not about ending. So when things do end, it's a harsh transition into something else. When we have smooth transitions, it's not about endings. And when tracks wrap up, they're not great, they're not memorable, they are usually just fine. And I think a lot of this speaks to the difficulty of writing an ending. Honestly, even from my experience, I'll tell you, it's probably one of the hardest parts of writing music. It's just, at least for me included, it's not something that comes incredibly natural or naturally. I sympathize with the pain of having to write an ending. But I do want to point it out when I hear it as well. If nothing else, then as constructive criticism, or I suppose in a better way, a recognition of pattern. Maybe they are intentionally doing this, and on other albums they wrap up ideas and tracks exceptionally well, that it is a specific flavor to this album that has to deal with unforeseen or unceremonious endings to events, eras, people, ideas. It's possible that it's a thematic decision or a musical one, but it is a pattern I'm picking up nonetheless, and you can see it through every facet of tying something up across this album, or at least the first half of this album. And I think endings like this one really showcase that. It was so close to having a strong ending, and then it just kind of trips at the very end. I do like this track though. I've liked all the tracks, honestly. This is progressive metal that goes down really easy. It is complex without feeling complex. It's one of those albums that you can just kind of put on in the background and enjoy. It's got solid groove, great atmosphere throughout. You don't really have to think too hard to enjoy it, but if you want to dive in a little bit more, there is some depth going on here. That's usually a pretty good place for progressive metal to be, at least as far as I don't know, I guess the commercial aspect of trying to make it big versus trying to still be yourself, be unique, to have your spin on things, to walk that tightrope of being approachable by an average metal listener while still putting yourself in it and making it more complex than simple ideas and just two chord phrases with some sick riffs. Not to downplay riff writing, there's definitely some bands out there that, their riffs are just top tier. It's not a skill that every band has. Riff writing definitely is its own thing. But the mixing of complex rhythmic ideas with digestibility is not easy. And I think it's a good merger, best of two worlds kind of idea. So everything on here has generally worked for me, even if I don't think I've had a lot to say analytically. We've done a lot on the technical side of things, but I still don't feel like I've explained the album, but I don't have that emotional connection like I've had with other albums, like Will Wood, or dang, why can't I think of his name? It's I don't remember. Anyways, there's been albums in the past that I've just emotionally connected with, and that's what we talked a lot about. This one's more on the technical side of things. It's a very smooth mixed drink. It's got some nice stuff in it, some good flavor combinations, but it goes down easy. It doesn't have a burn. And sometimes that's just what you want. And that's what this album's been for me so far. This track, though, I think it's interesting. I had mentioned at the beginning, I was like, oh, we just came off of the ballad. We're into some aggressive stuff. This is going to be a heavy track. And it kind of wasn't. We stuck with that height. Really punchy guitars, meaty bass licks, lots of drum work. We stuck with that for maybe a minute or so. Then we brought the energy down. Pretty much expected. We saw this on tracks 2 and 3 as well. But we never quite reached that peak again. While we did contrast with higher intensity moments, they just weren't quite as intense as that opening was. And by the end of the track, our metal sections, full band metal sections, were, well, kind of smooth again. I think a lot of this album, I'm trying to remember how I physically reacted to it, because most of the time, I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of in my head. My physical movement is autonomous. I'm mostly thinking about the music, and my body's just left to do what it wants to do. My brain's hyper-focused on the sounds. But I believe a lot of this was just sort of closed-eyed and swaying, just very smooth and relaxing. And honestly, this album is that. I think I've used the word smooth more than anything during this reaction so far, and that's quite accurate with my description of it. Every bit of this is easy to listen to, despite, going back to some of my talking points from the top of the video. It's easy to listen to. It's metal, but it's not aggressive. It's not in your face. We have distorted guitars. We have a lot of velocity on the drums, but mixing wise, it's not aggressive. There's a softness to the distortion. There's a quietness to the loudness. And a lot of it is atmospheric. Groovy rhythms that give us strong senses of atmosphere. The riffs here aren't designed to melt your face off. The riffs here are designed to bring down the energy. Most cases, we do have some driven sections on this album, but I think this song, particularly the back half of it, is a really good showcase of this. Distorted guitars, meaty bass, big drums, big vocals, and yet it's kind of tough to headbang to this. This isn't mosh music. Even the heavy sections are lighters out and swaying, and I think that speaks volumes to the kind of music they're creating. There are a couple of sections in here where it's just like getting into like a heavy groove to it. It's syncopated, it's groovy, but those moments are kind of far and few between. Even within the metal parts of it, even within the heavy sections. A little bit of it, as I talked earlier, is the production side of things. Yeah, the instruments are smoothed down. But it's also the composition, the chords chosen. This is an album that doesn't feel angry. It feels contemplative more often than not. I had mentioned earlier I had a tough time connecting with it emotionally, but I think that it's because of this. It's not really an emotion. Contemplation is an action. But this is an album that so far has asked me to think about stuff, or at the very least has personified sonically the action of thoughts. It's created sound spheres that are great for meditation. They're not necessarily grounded, but they're not floating either. They kind of sit at a core. They're not driven in a way that push you forward, but there is momentum. A lot of these tracks aren't just designed to sit in a space. It's designed to showcase forward progress at a steady pace that isn't aggressively or recklessly pushed towards the goals. There's thought behind them. And I think when we look at the lyrical themes of this album, and I'm sure it's going to show up on this track as well, they're sort of theoretical. A lot of them focus on this two people. A lot of the tracks are about two people. But as I mentioned, I think it was the last set of lyrics, it often feels like it's a metaphor for something else. The two people are designed to represent two something else's ideologies, schools of thought, opinions, whatever. A lot of this feels meditative. And I think that comes through as well with the vocal delivery, which is never aggressively delivered. I would say that the higher pitch sections of the words are the most directed and projected parts of this album so far regarding the vocal delivery. But still there was a comfort, a caressing element to it. It was firm, but not blunt. It just wanted to make sure you heard it. And I think that this softness, this delicate element to this embodies this entire album and presents it with something a bit more nuanced, something that asks for rational thought over reckless action. Contemplation, I think, is the word that stands out to me at the halfway point of this album as its core. Well, again, emotion's a weird word for it, but core action. Much like Kuraman, we have a track here that focuses on two people and the fallout of a relationship with our narrator wanting more time with the other person. We have the chorus that says, "Given no chance to forgive me, left to absolve an illusion." It says, "Beneath the surface, I sense how I'm growing older, holding the pieces you left like a last intervention." Very interesting, hanging on to the final words, the last gift imparted onto our narrator, and using them to change their ways. Using them as a guide to alter who they are. It doesn't even say if this is for better or worse, but regardless, they are hanging on to these final words. It says, "It came unexpected. It's lying at my door. Ways that I reflected, you've been there before, but still my apprehension tells me you have gone so far and they can't say where you are." This longing, this needing to know where someone is to close that distance, but the other person is unknown. There is this part, though, in the bridge. It says, "In my wake I swim against the tide, and in the late hour coming to your side. So leave my life now, putting out the lights that shine on my all, abandoned here by time." Despite the fact that earlier it mentioned that they were trying to improve themselves, at least based off of the thoughts of their friend here, that they feel left alone. They don't feel like they're growing at all. They feel abandoned. And that whatever light shines on them has been put out. Interesting. It continues the theming as well of all of these tracks dealing with two. An I, the narrator, and the you, someone who is to be compared to or correlated against the narrator. Next track is called Koniskas. It is the shortest one on the album, not even breaking 5 minutes. Unless there's something wild in this track that I need to talk about, we'll probably run it into track 7's Ennui, which is also a bit on the shorter side. Tracks 8 and 9 are over 8 minutes each. Definitely give both of those space to exist by themselves. All right, let's kick it. All right, a little bit on the lighter side, like words.
I believe in something other than what's written on the wall. How we are murdered for the pieces that are rendering it all.
Okay, so we are just straight for then.
Bringing in the candlelight, something to believe in. Now I'm breathing
The 3-3-2.
that you parted in the park. You're walking like your father.
I like bees buzzing in the background. Lots of tension there.
I've been reading all your markings. You've always tried to hide. Set aside your feelings like you've seen them locked inside.
I love the guitars. The reverb sells this feeling of, again, contemplation. The bass grounds everything.
And I can feel it in our weakness. We have gained since we were born. I'm not a tower of strength to leave you, as all the reasons left proceed. And I know we are walking like we're falling. Still there is something you can see.
Oh, that bends.
Silence comes your way. Silence comes, silence comes. While we can sense the missing order.
There's both a loneliness and a longing throughout this track. We explored in different percentages of each.
While you are not awake, growing from a whisper, the voice inside is still restrained. And I can see it grow our weakness into the undefinable. How we are searching through the debris now from the fear of indeceit.
I love those tight little double hits on the snare.
We are walking like we're falling. Still there is something we can see. And I know that you face a reverence to break through, to have the freedom of your way.
want to see a drum cam of this section. This is filthy. And you know, the tension harmonically only adds to everything the drummer's laying down. Yeah, dude. The only thing I would want to talk about is the drums, and I would praise them. I don't know what was going on there. It was too quick, too dense for me to dissect on a first listen. Absolutely immaculate drum pattern, though. So we've kind of gone to like a Phrygian dominant, but there's tension, more tension than usual worked into that mode too. Very choppy. I think this is the most rhythmically disjointed we've explored on this. Very spacey. Of push and pull on this one between a denser layered and thinner layered.
Fear in your dreams will be washing away all what you really want me to come to you. I will be there to stand before you, face to face. My strife has brought me
Wow. Might be my two favorite tracks of the album so far, though a lot of the reason that I elevate them is because of contrast. I've been enjoying the album. I don't want anyone to think that, the rest of the album just hasn't worked for me and I finally found stuff that I enjoy. And to be fair, a lot of what we've seen in track 6 and 7 really isn't too different than what we've seen in other tracks. 6 going for more of the lighter stuff like we saw on The Words, and 7 going for the heavier stuff like what we saw in Tabula Rasa and the beginning of Pluton. It's very much quite within the wheelhouse and sound of the album, but I feel like they're kind of pushing into more extremes. Now, for example, track 7's Ennui is the most just disjointed this album has been, period. I had such a tough time keeping up with the rhythmic flow of this. The accent points are incredibly wild. What the bass is accenting is different from what the snare is accenting, which is different from what the guitars are accenting. It is tough to follow along to. There is a general groove if you can find it. Sometimes it's not even there, but occasionally some cymbal will give you some sort of polymetric backbeat to groove to, but it will not line up with what the core instruments that are presented in the center of the mix are telling you you should be bobbing your head to or headbanging to. It's just not very clear in the most present parts of the track. Koniskas takes us into the opposite side. I think this is one of the lighter tracks. The Words is probably still the lightest of the album so far, but it does find ways to explore a general softness, which I think is fantastic to set us up for track 7 Ennui, especially after hearing half of track 5's Pluton, which goes in a bit of a heavier direction. This is a nice little lull between peaks. But also that finale is wild. It doesn't quite hit the peaks that we had seen at the beginning of Pluton, but it also sets us up to hit this brand new rhythmic peak in track 7. It is a great way of carrying momentum and pacing through the album. And it's just a really cool section in and of itself as well. Track 6 doesn't really... It's another solid song. It doesn't do anything that breaks the mold, but that ending was phenomenal. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have much to say about this. The drum part was just sick. It was incredibly complex, both sonically and what I imagined visually it would be. There's a lot of places where I don't even understand how he's doing it. I asked for a drum cam during the reaction, and I still want one. But the music around it too was just incredibly tense, tying into this incredible energy and electricity that the drums were building, being elevated into this feeling of discomfort through the harmonic palette. And this pushed us directly into Ennui, which is just wow. I gotta look this up, but I'm pretty sure ennui is a feeling of apathy, of not caring, something along those lines. I don't know if that's totally accurate, but I do believe it's close enough. And I do get this feeling throughout. There is an attention to detail in this album. I've mentioned a feeling of caressing, of calm, of control, smoothness throughout most of this. It's not an album that is intentionally abrasive. At this point in the album, though, that attention to detail, that care for palatability is gone. And we see an extreme side of this band that I didn't know they had. The rhythms in here are incredibly jagged. As I mentioned earlier, it's just really difficult to follow along with them. I don't know if I don't think I put it in camera, but through almost every single time we returned to the verse, I was trying to count it out with hand direction off screen, even going as like super jagged, trying to keep the exact moments that the beats would be rather than something a bit more fluid, which has some leeway to it. I wanted preciseness because I kept feeling like we were a quarter of a beat removed. Parts of the rhythm, I was like, wait, are we in 23/8? Like bonkers time signature here. I almost thought we had to bring it down to 16 because even counting in eighth notes, I felt like we were only getting half of an eighth note at times. Eventually, I came on to the conclusion that it is some sort of 3/4. I don't know what the phrasing of it is. I don't know how many bars of 3 we're looking at. But I think if you count it just right with an incredible level of precision and try your best to ignore the core rhythms that are being presented. Again, none of them I think are the true beat or pulse of this track. They're all syncopated against it, all polyrhythmic as well. That there is a 3/4 that persists underneath all of this. But it took me a long time to get to that point, and I'll be honest, I don't know why I did that. It's not like there's a microphone here. Anyways, I'll be honest, I'm still not entirely sure. There's like 10% of me that still thinks at least one bar in there is a little shorter than the rest, just enough to throw it off once in a while. But for you to feel like there's a general safety, something that you can rely on, a 3/4, something stable through the rest of it. The fact that I have any ambiguity to it, that I'm not 100% confident at all, I think already speaks to the complexities of that section. It is difficult to suss out. And it is mixed alongside it with some generally harmonically tense sounds. It's not as dissonant as the end of track 6 with that crazy drum part, but it is also not as soothing as the rest of this album has been. When you pair all of that together, you get a track that is just difficult to listen to. It's difficult to groove to. I had mentioned that a lot of this album, up to track 5, was a nice mix between palatable and complex. If you wanted to just groove to it, it's really good background music, just a nice atmosphere to be within. And, you know, if you wanted to dive into it, there are layers harmonically and rhythmically that you can check out and, you know, get more of an intellectual, critical perspective on. This one sort of discards the entire casual side to it and says, if you don't pay attention to me, you're not going to get it, dude. I'm doing some crazy stuff. Keep up, kid. And it's a wild change of pace. You know, on the last quarter of the album, it's wild to go here. And I think that that contrast stands out immensely. It is a really cool part of this. Once again, it's an album that I kind of thought I had pegged. I'm like, yeah, I know what's going on in this album. And generally speaking, this song still foundationally is built off of a lot of the same ideas. They just really took it into a direction I didn't think they were heading. And honestly, I didn't know that they were capable of. This is gnarly. There's moments where we break away from this, though. This is primarily what I think is the verse to the track. And we do explore some softer, more soothing ideas, at least as far as textures and rhythms go. But harmonically, it continues to sit in this negativity, in this funk. There is no calming element here anymore. A lot of this sits within the more negative aspect, which has been present through the album. But here, it's front and center. Definitely an interesting track. And the next track is called Void, and the final one is called The Others Fall. And while I haven't seen too much of a story throughout this album, there has been recurring themes. Although with the series of Ennui, Void, and The Others Fall, I feel like maybe there is some connective tissue between all of this that I should be paying attention to, though I'm going to be completely honest, I'm oblivious to. Again, I see patterns. There's themes that continue to show up throughout the lyrics. But as far as an overarching tale, I haven't really caught on to one yet. With that said, let's dive into the lyrics for these two and see where they take us. The lyrics for Koniskas elude me. There's a lot going on here. Probably the densest track we've seen lyrically. Interestingly, it is the shortest song on the album. But I don't know. I looked up the title to see if I can't get some direction there. And well, the only thing I found related to that word is that it is a Latvian word that loosely translates into conical. I don't know how much that actually applies to this track, though the final line does represent a downward spiral, much like an upside down cone would have. So maybe that is supposed to be what it is, but it doesn't really give me a lot of insight into the track. Once again, though, we do have an I and a U. It says, I believe in something other than what's written on the wall, how we are murdered for the pieces that are rendering it all. This part I get, that the narrator is a cog in the machine, and that something is being built from the pieces of the cogs. They don't have much say in it, and it seems to be maybe physically, maybe emotionally, maybe character murder here. Maybe they have to become someone they don't want to be as they're given a place within this larger machine. It says, though, now you're bringing in the kindle lights, something to believe in. Well, now I'm breathing in the water that you have parted in the past. It seems that there is some olive branch, maybe a fake olive branch being extended, the kindle lights, providing something for the cogs to believe in. Our narrator has nothing of it, though. Says, I'm just going to breathe in the water, then the opposite of fire. Says that you've parted in the past, which makes me think of miracles, the biblical parting of the Red Sea. But what does that have to do with anything? Breathing in past miracles? I read this as opposition, especially with the idea of water versus fire, but maybe it is that our narrator has been brought over, that the kindle lights have had them believing in the machine now, that they're soaking up all of the past miracles, as maybe as false as they might be, or as true as they might be, of this machine. The system, as indicated from track 2. But the rest of the track doesn't really focus on that. There is still opposition to this system. So I don't know. That final line throws me off. It says, I can feel it in our weakness we have gained since we were born. Another tower of strength to leave you as all the reason left recede. I don't know. There is a lacking of strength of the people fighting the system, maybe purposefully fighting, maybe subconsciously fighting the system. The chorus, though, says, I know we are walking like we're falling. There's something, though, that you can't see. It's silence that comes your way. The best I read this is that the opposition is growing stronger and our narrator foresees a victory. The system will eventually fall. It will grow silent. It says, though, that you're making all the right decisions while you're not awake, growing from a whisper. The voice inside is still restrained. So I don't know if they actually disagree with the you in this, whether that is a person or a larger society or system or whatever. I'm kind of starting to tie the themes of this track, at the very least, back to the ones of Tabula Rasa, of wanting, of seeing a system or society that they don't agree with on any of the options they're giving and wanting to rebuild it entirely. But I don't understand how all these stanzas tie into that. The end of the track says, those walls, once raised by greed, stand tall while we stand still. Pay no heed, seized by war, hand away our lives, and thus we can spiral on. And again, it's very awkwardly worded. And I still think there's some syntax and vocabulary stuff that just kind of makes it difficult for me to get what's being said here. But I think it says that the walls will continue to stand as long as we stand. We must take action to topple the wall, but that most people, or maybe the system itself, tells people to pay no heed to it. Don't think about it at all. Just hand your lives away and we'll continue to spiral on, spiral downward, I'm going to assume. Things will get worse unless you take action is what I think is being said here, but I really have to squint to see that reading of it. It is not directly stated, and it's not through metaphor. Again, it's through word choice and word order that throws me off here. It's really interesting. Usually it's the figurative language that throws me off, but today it's syntax. It feels like it's directly stated. It's just, it's written awkwardly. So I double checked the definition of ennui, and I had originally described it as apathy, and that's not accurate. There's a parallel there, but I wouldn't even say that it's kind of close. Ennui is, what is it described as? A feeling of weariness or dissatisfaction, generally paralleling boredom. This does talk about that a little bit. It speaks about not really thinking for yourself, not really having goals in mind. It says, breathe in the air now. It's a harmony of woe. Blindly leading the like-minded, feel the need as they grow out of sight. It says, in your voice I hear you sink. Come ennui. Doubt will exhaust your hope. Fearing your dreams will be washed away. All you really want is for me to come to you. I will be there to stand before you face to face. My strife has brought me home. You'll never say that I wasn't there. The second verse mentions that you have come to loathe me too, reaching past walls and racing time. That's pretty much it, though. It's a lot of repetition in here, and the final chorus, I will be there to stand before you, face to face, my strife has brought me home. It's just repeated. This feeling of you'll have no regrets and you'll never say that I wasn't there, just repeated over and over and over. It's about this conflict that has been sort of presented this entire album. Again, I don't know if there is an overarching narrative, but this theme of a narrator in conflict with an other has been rather consistent. A distance placed between them is now closing. This track implies there is going to be a meeting, that the distance has finally been reduced. From here, we're diving into the void. Let's see where Soen takes us next.
My thoughts, my own stream out of my conscience.
Oh, I love that bass line. The large size of the guitars, the constant movement of the snares, the big vocal harmonies. Incredibly dense. Nice 4/4 here. It's kind of creeping along. It's low energy, but definitely a lot of momentum. A lot of offbeat accents on the vocal melody here. I don't recall hearing that in previous tracks. The vocals are getting in on the syncopation with the instruments. That is just a gnarly sound.
To see your promise creates the shelter for all our virtue. So
Of all that conflict, the clashing sounds we had in the previous section, this returns to chill, cool, calm, and collected.
comfort accompanies the way. I strive to like you till I discover it.
Got a little shaker off in the corner. I like it.
Is reconstructed here. Your will within your circles. Make out the beacon that has it all revolved. We set your mind to how kismet would resolve. My hurt, my fear is where you tap into.
Now I think this is where we should get that gnarly sound back. The drum and bass pulling us through this whole section. Great fill, cool bass line. Really smooth growth of this section, but coming into it was abruptly sharp. That's how I understand this group. Finally bringing some of that percussion in from track 1. I've been waiting all album. Why introduce that for 30 seconds? Bring the hand drums back. And clapping too. Kind of brings a communal component into the percussion. I almost let that roll over. I don't know about discussing 17 minutes of music in one go, but with the last track, I'm like, dude, if it rolls over, I'm gonna let it. It's the last song, I might as well see how this works, as a full vision. But it didn't. At the very last second, dude, this was gorgeous. What I find interesting is that despite being one of the longest tracks on the album, the ninth track is going to be the longest by 12 seconds. They're both right around that 8.5 minute mark, though. It doesn't feel like an 8.5 minute song. There's a few variations in this track as far as instrumental parts, but honestly, it really feels like it follows along in the same patterns we've explored previously. We have a verse and a chorus, usually some sort of transition idea, a pre-chorus or a refrain that sits between them. We usually get a little bit of musical evolution there that attempts to bring the energy up or down so that the harsh shift between the verse and the chorus isn't as harsh. Or maybe to introduce a new sound. I think it was track 6 or 5. Used this mid section in order to create tension before resolving into the chorus. I'm not going to say it's always a transitory component of the track, but it does introduce a new concept. But we have a verse chorus thing going on here, and then an extended bridge into an outro. Honestly, despite the 8.5-minute runtime, there's still really only 4 concepts going on here, which is, yeah, it just takes its time. It's not 8.5 minutes by density, it's 8.5 minutes by length. I think each of our verse chorus combos was like 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes or something like that. It took us a while to get out of our opening verse chorus sections, of which there's only 2. There's a verse chorus, and then we dropped the energy massively, and well, we had one idea for the final part of the final half of this track. The opening verse and chorus, it's what they do well. It's very atmospheric. We got some cool guitar stuff in there. We got some cool bass stuff in there. The drums laying down some polyrhythms. It's groovy, but it's atmospheric. The vocalist, honestly, the vocalist is the most unique part here compared to the vocal work across the rest of the track. Here we have syncopated, quicker delivered lines. It's not a lot of longer, held out notes, very legato. It's not quite staccato. We're not focusing on short, abrupt syllables, but it is generally less flowy than we've heard from the vocals in the past. There's a focus on these offbeat accents, kind of creating a harsher rhythmic syncopation to the vocal line than we've heard at all. Usually it's the instruments creating the syncopation, the vocals soar above everything, and that's not quite how this one is tracked out. I find that to be interesting, and I'm curious if anything in the lyrics would point to why the vocals are a bit sharper in this track. Ennui seems like the track that would have introduced sharper vocal lines, and that one kind of leaned into how the vocals typically are delivered. So that's really the only standout for me there. The back half of this track, though, is the spotlight to me. As soon as I heard the entire track cut out except the vocals, this reminded me of track 2 or 3, which did the same thing. It is ear-catching. Immediately, I'm snapped over to this, what's going on? I've been in a groove, right? Some cool things going on. I'm picking up some details, but generally, this is Soen. This is the Tellurian album. They kind of have a groove. They have a thing that they do, a blueprint for the album, if you will. And here, it's exactly as I'm expecting. I'm grooving with it. Then out of nowhere, it just cuts out. Instrumental silence with, well, the vocalist is singing gorgeously. Great vibrato here. I think they are using vibrato throughout the entire album. It's just not very pronounced in a way that anytime there's instruments going along it, alongside it, you don't really hear the vibrato. Here, though, it's clear. You can't miss it. It's the only thing that's happening. Gorgeous vocals being laid down, and the bass comes in, indicates something's about to happen. We get some drums and some guitars, and beautiful transition into this next section. As usual, these guys know how to build. Ending things, you can expect a rough transition there or just a rougher ending, but building out of something, these guys can do that. They've got that skill perfected. This transition was immaculate, pulling into the next idea, and from here continuing to escalate more and more layers, denser harmonic ideas, bigger instruments, until it just kind of becomes something soothing again. I thought, okay, once again, Soen knows how to do this, man. This is their bread and butter. They've established in this album. They are masters of this craft. And then they caught me off guard. The vocals quit for a while. The energy stays smooth. Except that drummer, he takes off, dude. Probably my second favorite, there's a lot of good drum parts on this album. It's up there though. It's up there. Tabula Rasa had a fantastic drum part. And there was one more. Oh, it was Ennui, wasn't it? With just incredibly sick. Oh no, it was Koniskas. It was the end of Koniskas, track 6. That just phenomenal drum work. This is in the top 3 then. And a huge drum solo. It's interesting because the atmosphere around it is calm, smooth, soothing. Same ways I describe a lot of this album, but the drummer is going at it. They're like, I'm done with this. You're not getting any light, calculated stuff from me. I'm tearing it up right now. And it's a really interesting contrast, but eventually it gets reined in a little bit and the bass comes in to support it. And the bass is sort of this midway point. The guitars are very light. They're distorted, sure, there's heaviness to them, but what they're playing and how they're playing it and how it's coming across is light and soothing and smooth. The bass is a little more complex, and it's the halfway point, the bridge between the softness of the guitars and the complexity and insanity of the drum work. Eventually, the drums get reined in a bit more. Even past that, we get some nice bass work in here, and it just becomes a very measured and balanced section. What seemed like two extremes somehow going off at the same time, it works now. The drums are still soloing. They're still a bit more complex than what the guitars are doing, but they don't feel as separated. It's not as much of a schism here as it was when it was initially presented. The bass has reined it in, has found a middle point for both of these extremes to exist within, and kind of brought them a little closer, closed the distance, and found a way to make it all work. And I think that this is interesting because it raises the energy of the low part, reduces the energy of the high part, but then eventually erases the drums altogether. We end up back with the hand drums from the intro to the album. I had been waiting for this. I thought it was interesting to bring these up and then never present them again. They had to have been somewhere else in the album. And here they are. I don't know what that represents though. I don't know what to read into that other than maybe this is it. The penultimate track. This is our peak. We might as well bring something back. We might as well do something to deviate from what we've been doing. I have no idea why they decided to bring it back here in particular. But I am glad we got to hear more of it. Cool rhythms. Oh, we got the claps in there too. Again, it brings a communal element to this, a societal thing. A lot of this album has been I am in opposition to the systems that be. Here though, bringing in the acoustic drums and the clapping, it creates something that feels like a group. I don't know if the lyrics, the story is going to push in this direction, but I certainly get a we are in opposition now. Or maybe worse, it's we are all connected to the system, as we saw in Ennui, that it's about control and that it works. And maybe that's why our narrator has been isolated this entire time. Regardless, there is a group present here that hasn't really existed on this album other than the intro. Beautiful track though. It's just the whole back half of it is one gorgeous moment after another. So let's dive into some lyrics here. See where they're taking us in this penultimate track. Well, we are in a void here. It mentions that we are through an astral wasteland that unfolds into a vastness, all of this beyond the void. It says that diving through this, I come to find you deep in the bottom layer, despite your reasons to hide yourself in there, your hurt and your fear. is where I tap into. So our narrator is chasing down this other. And then it says, the chorus, I wait to see your promise, create the shelter for all our virtues. So how I am a new lease of life when my comfort accompanies the waves. I don't quite get it. There's been an opposition, a rebellion this entire time, and yet here he dives down into the void to find the other. And when he finds them trapped with hurt and fear, he says, I can't wait to see your promise, which is to create a shelter for our virtues, to protect and house and nurture the things that we want to do in life. This seems opposite of what we checked out in Koniskas and Ennui. Again, I don't know, and at this point I don't think there is an overarching narrative to all of this, but there have been thematic consistencies throughout. And here, I don't know, this song doesn't seem like it fits. But after the chorus, we go back to the strife. It says, I strive to blind you until I discover where defining freedom is reconstructed here. Your rule, your will within your circles. Okay, so we're going back to the rebelling angle, that we need to destroy this other because all they seek is control, suppression. But what would be their promise then of creating shelter for our... I don't know. I'm so confused by the chorus. It seems to indicate a totally different perspective here. And that's all of it. We return back to the idea of going through the void, and we hit the chorus again, and then the outro says, please hide. Who sees who we are? Trust shares all keys, one knows all. Which is cryptic. Incredibly cryptic. I've read this several times. I've read it out loud to myself off camera several times, trying to understand what it's saying, and I just don't get it. And this seems to be a recurring theme on this album. It's probably a me thing, but I don't know, dude. There's so many times I read it, I'm like, I should know what this means, but I don't. Longest track on the album, 842, The Others Fall. You know, I think it did go into it. That warble sound was at the end of Void. Very interesting start to this track. Okay, so it is going to be connected to this first verse. Nice strong bass lead section. such an awkward rhythm. It fit within the void of rhythm at the beginning, but here it's... actually, it didn't even really fit in the intro. It also was out of place there. There's a lack of landmarking on this one, too. We don't really have any accent points, so we gotta look at melodic phrasing in order to understand the rhythmic function. Got some snare kicking in now, but still. A little rockier here. Getting away from that metal sound briefly. We haven't really had too many sound effects or synth-based sounds on this album, have we? The inclusion in the transition from track 8 to 9, including that section right there, it's quite unique on the album. Why does this guitar riff remind me of Schism? Cool. I think it's the rhythm against the reverb. I should have seen the writing on the wall. This album is not one with strong endings, and that kind of fits for this entire track. It's not a particularly strong ending for the album in the final 40 seconds or so, but I don't even think it's a strong track to end on. Koniskas, Ennui, and Void were certainly a much stronger series of tracks than this one. Here's my problem with it. It falls under the Meshuggah category of rhythmic writing, where it's just not rhythmically interesting, at least not from an enjoyment standpoint. There is a puzzle here that I would love to solve. The lack of strong accent points in the rhythm, the sort of hyper focus on just one or two notes in the melody, in the pitches of the riff, it creates an ambiguity. It's kind of difficult to follow along with this track because there just isn't a lot of information. I talked about this album being incredibly digestible despite its complexity, and this is the opposite of that. It is more complex than anything else we've listened to, even beyond what we saw in, I'm blanking out on what track that was. Was it Ennui? I think it was. Even more complex than that though, but it doesn't add anything that's going to help understand it, help make it digestible, help make it palatable or enjoyable. It's simply just complex. And on top of that, it is incredibly indulgent. There has been more dynamic writing within less complex ideas in previous tracks. I think that the riffage here is simple. It's the rhythmic side that is interesting, not the harmonic or melodic at all. The dense emotional exploration, the atmospheres that we've checked out, the incredible grooves, the melodies, the counterpoint, all of that is gone. We're just left with something that is purely technical. And this is really strong characterization too. If this track is about removing the emotional factor of this strife. It is called The Other's Fall. I'm assuming there is still some sort of strife between two people here. Removing the emotional component and viewing it purely logically or rational or something like that to remove the emotional side of this song absolutely works. It is quite possible. I read the lyrics and I think, dude, this is a masterpiece. Thematically accurate and well composed masterpiece to wrap up this album. But I do not enjoy this track. From a casual sonic perspective, it bored me. And that's not something I've said about this album at all. And I don't think it's the length of it. I don't think it's the fact that I am now 2.5 hours into this, 4 hours into my real time as I've paused to read lyrics and attempt to decipher them. I think I've spent more time looking at lyrics off camera here than I usually do. It's been a while. I don't think that plays into it though. You know, other albums, sure, I'm fatigued by the end, but I've had a blast on this one. I could listen to the album again. But this final track just didn't grab me. Not a single part of it did. The vocal melodies were less developed. The rhythmic devices are just not groovy. It's all overly technical, overly complex, and it is incredibly indulgent. By the end of the track, I was incredibly tired of that final riff. And then there was a bit of silence, and I was like, oh, they're going to do the fake out again. We get some silence in here, then we're going to introduce a new section. And they didn't. We got a new drum part, but then we got the same riff on top of that. And I was just like, no, seriously? Oh, geez. I don't know. Again, could be very appropriate for the themes they're exploring, very good on the artistic side of things, but I would not want to listen to this track again. And I think it really all starts with that opening. We have a lot of tom work going on that lays down the general pace and flow of it. We have a consistent beat. I don't know what the phrasing is, so I don't know what time signature we're in. Again, there's just not a lot of landmarking there, but we do have a consistent pulse. We don't have to guess with that. But the guitar part that's played alongside that is wildly difficult to follow. And right from the start, it creates something that is incredibly technical to the point of losing digestibility, losing the ability to, attract a non-educated group of people, music educated, I should say, and not allowing them to headbang along with your music, even if they don't understand the technicalities of it. This is something that they have done so well, is that you don't need a music degree in order to understand their music. You can feel it, as technical, as complex as it gets. You can feel the emotion, you can feel the rhythm, you can always groove with it. That's not true here. And as we get into the opening verse, which retains some parts of the intro but brings in a new drum and guitar part, and there's just a lot of clashing here. It's just rhythmically awkward. It's just not fitting together. I wasn't enjoying myself. And this was this was the theme through the song. Very awkward rhythms, not fun to listen to for me, and repetitive riffs. Lots of repetitive, simple riffs. I don't get a lot of atmosphere on this one. I don't get a lot of emotion on this one. I just get math. And sometimes that can be fun. In this case, for me, it wasn't. Let me hit some lyrics. I'll give you some final thoughts after that. Then we'll wrap this one up. Lyrically, this track is about becoming one with everything. It's a type of enlightenment, type of meditative enlightening or awakening. It says, heed the other, clear the mind to conceive the whole, every cell interblend, put the world before me. Later on in the chorus, it says, once the eyes are turned, all is lost. This time has come for the all. The outro says, breathe in the possible, in the charge of the light, in the passing night. Come, be it lost from sight. Be every thought you have. Be the past here. There's a very interesting wording there. It says, let everywhere be your side. New is the same old. Affirmed is the new unknown. Infinite torrents, eternal the hours. Once again, the syntax is cryptic, but I do think that it's generally speaking about transcendence. To view something outside of oneself. The line, the opening of the chorus, once eyes are turned, all is lost, really stands out to me. This is, I think, a key component to this track. There is obviously all the thoughts about being everything, everywhere, all at once, everyone connected, but this is really the one that stands out to me. If you turn a blind eye to any injustice, you have already lost. You must be there for all, for everyone, for everything, through all of time. This is about connecting humanity through time and space. This is about understanding the human condition and having empathy for all, big and small, rich and poor. That the individual is meaningless. That any adversity towards one is an adversity towards all. Beautiful finale. Now, granted, I am kind of cherry picking here. I looked at, 12 lines or so. There's probably a good 30 in here. I'm not going to say the rest of them mean something to me. It's quite possible that they continue to support my take on this, but some of them might clash with that a little bit. I honestly don't know. There's so much in here that I don't get. But I do think that generally how I view this is sustained well by almost half of the lyrics, or at least my read on almost half of the lyrics. And this idea of being everywhere, of being connected to everything, of being a part of everyone's life, having this enlightenment to remove yourself from yourself and to be a part of a collective whole, isn't anything I got out of the music. The music is entirely singular, it's indulgent, it is difficult to ascertain. Actually, that part might line up. Another layer of understanding the human condition certainly might be foreign to someone who hasn't achieved that enlightenment, and this song might be showcasing me this next level of thoughts figuratively through the music, and being that it's difficult to figure out, maybe that's what it's trying to imply. Maybe the fact that I said I was bored with the music is an indictment of my own character. Maybe as someone who hasn't been as enlightened as our narrator here, maybe it would be as comparable as me calling them stupid for their opinion of things simply because I can't exist on the level that they do. It's criticism or opinion based in ignorance. Maybe that's what they're going for here. Maybe. I feel like that's a little bit of a stretch, though. I do think that the idea of a second layer of understanding on like a universal scale would be more complex for your first level. So the music needs to be more complex. I can get behind that part. Regardless, like I said, I just don't think it's as interesting as an ending as some of the other tracks have been. And I'm just not engaged with it sonically. But it's quite possible that's just me. That's skill issue. That's, if I was better at music listening, I'd enjoy this more kind of deal. I don't know. Let's wrap this up though. These are my thoughts on Soen's Tellurian album. What did you think of this? Did you enjoy it? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? I posed some questions in here. If you'd like to answer any of those, you can go ahead and do that here. Toss all of that as well as anything else you'd like to add into the comments section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. UTC. We're going to do a live stream over at Twitch TV/Critical Composer. Usually goes for about 2.5 hours. We just chill, chat, listen to some good music. It is very relaxed and a wonderful way to spend part of your Sunday if you can make it. Otherwise, Monday, I'll be back at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to continue on with the usual reactions. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.